Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you all for coming. I'm here as one of the curators. I'm Shelley McNamara. Yvonne Farrell is the other curator, not here today. The purpose of these meetings that we have on architecture is to have an opportunity to speak to a number of the participants and to try to air ideas behind the contributions that they made to the Biennale, and also just for people to get a sense of the kind of architects they are, or what way they think, or what their preoccupations or values might be. And this is something we were requested to do by La Biennale, because La Biennale have found that not just students but the public are very interested in architects speaking about their work and speaking about the way that they think. So for today we chose the sub-theme. I mean, each of the participants involved have all made their interpretations of what they imagined we were asking them to do when we asked them to make an exhibit based on the theme of free space and based on the theme of the values which we tried to articulate and represent in our manifesto. But we've also asked the participants today to speak about another theme that we had in the manifesto, which was related to the practice of teaching. And while we had a special section related to this, the people we've chosen today are not just from that section, the practice of teaching, but are chosen in a more general way in order to instigate a general discussion. And one of the reasons why we thought about it was important for us to have this sub-theme of practice of teaching is because of the enrichment that teaching brings to practitioners, and hopefully vice versa. And it's also the connection between building and imagining, that is somehow brought into the universities and into the making and learning about architecture. So each of the people here are practititioners, and each of them are involved in teaching at different levels and in different ways. And we call, in our description, in our catalogue, we talk about the studio in the School of Architecture as being a laboratory of the imagination. And I suppose that's been our experience as teachers, that while one hopes one's own atelier and office is also a laboratory of imagination, let's say it's also more restricted or constricted with the realities of practice. And there's something incredibly liberating about being able to work with a group of students in a more free and open way. And that's not to say that it's not realistic, but it's simply that one can shed some of the limitations that perhaps should be shed within the practice of architecture in any case. So we've asked these participants to speak about this, about free space, about their involvement in the Biennale, and as a sub-theme, their relationship between teaching and practice. I'm really delighted with this group of people to be here on the stage with you today. We have Rosana Montiel from Mexico. I'm not going to go into the biography of each architect. We hope you have seen or will see the work in the exhibition. One of the things, I suppose, that we were struck by in finding out, because we didn't know Rozana before this Biennale, but one of the things in our research we were struck by was the fact that she talks about beauty as a tool, even though the work that she does is very often quite utilitarian and infrastructural almost. Mario Botta, who you all know as a practicing architect, but also as a great teacher and an initiator of a new school of architecture in his home town in Mendrisio. And I suppose what's really wonderful is to have him here since he represents the ethos and the beginnings of the school, which has grown from strength to strength. We have Robert McCarter, again a practitioner and teacher and writer, and has written amazing books on architecture, on architects ranging from Louis Kahn to Carlos Scarpa to Stephen Hall and, if I may say so, Grafton Architects recently. And we have benefited from a wonderful collaboration with Robert. Sandra Barclay from our own Lima, which we feel a part of now. And Barclay Cruz, the work we went to see when we were in Lima is astonishing, wonderful work. I should say that Rozana and Jean-Pierre have just won the Mies Crown Hall America's Prize, which is quite hard to say, but it's the MCHAP Award, which is the best award for building in all of the Americas for 2017-18. So it's wonderful. And it's for the building that they exhibited in the Biennale, which is a university building. And Níall McLaughlin, yeah. Again, Níall McLaughlin, architect practicing in London. We still call him an Irish architect, although we weren't supposed to and we weren't allowed to in the catalogue, but for us he's Irish. And Níall has been an amazing presence in our lives, both as a practitioner and as a commentator and as a teacher. So we'd like to, we've asked each person to make a 5-minute presentation, which is difficult. And then after each of the when the 5 presentations have been made, my role is to initiate a conversation between each of these participants. So I would like to call on Sandra to start things in motion.
Okay. Thank you, Shelley. I'm very honored to be here. And thank you really for the invitation. So, okay. Can we have the images in the little screen? Better. Yeah. No, if it's possible. If not.
Sorry, I really like looking at the big screen, which was why I was trying to turn the chairs around. If you want to use the little screen, that's fine. Which would you?
No, it's okay.
Yeah,
it's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay. So, architecture is about light, matter, and time. If we want to teach architectural design, we must understand how a building works, how a project, which is about ideas anticipating a reality, can transform or modify the way we feel, work, or live a place. This is only possible if you experience it. Otherwise, we can't measure the impact of the ideas behind. Visiting key buildings is essential for learning architecture. That's what I do in my studio. Not working. As architect, I built my own culture, observing, experiencing, drawing, and feeling places and buildings. The first visit with the students is a house designed by Enrique Siriani, Casa Madonna. Siriani was my professor in Paris, and he introduced me to the fundamentals of modern architecture. I tried to transmit to students the power space has to give wellness through generosity. In this house, in the south coast of Lima, fluidity, continuity, expansion, and compression within a confined space under the sun are concepts students will understand. We jump into the scale of collective dwellings in San Felipe, visiting a social housing project of the 60s made also by Siriani, where a sense of urbanity and how an intelligent residential typology can be generous through combining modules and repeating them, defining spaces that gather people, blurring the boundary between the private and the public. We visit also the place of remembrance where students learn about the architectural promenade and about how memory can be inscribed in the way we build. I remember
Can somebody help us?
I remember when Shelley and Yvonne came to visit our project, and we had a wonderful conversation about all these themes and how climate was a powerful element when designing in Lima. Of course, we close the visits with the UTEC building. We learn in this building how space is a void filled with meaning. It connects not only functions, but most of all, people. Okay. How this void, sorry about that. Oh, this is hard. Okay. How this void makes the building permeable in order to relate with the neighborhood, the distant city, and the territory. Free space is about generosity in architecture. This is a place where students feel openness in a contained space, and at the same time, they find spaces for informal learning outside the classrooms. After the visits, in an intuitive way and with a minimal program, students start building their own space, their own promenade, searching for light, trying to find an equilibrium between mass and space. They work in two conditions: above the ground, where horizontal and vertical plans regulate light, and underground, where horizontal and vertical plans must catch and bring light through them. We use big models where they can imagine themselves in the spaces. Then they draw perspective to verify how they will feel inside. We do the other way around. They start with real buildings, then models, and finish with a bidimensional way to represent it. Later in the semester, the program becomes more complex, and so space, models, and drawing does. The idea of built landscapes appears. Okay. The spaces in between are the real material of these exercises. When asked to design a generic lecture room building at the University of Piura, located very near the equator line in the Peruvian northern desert, the UTEC building was key for understanding what we should do. And it was also for our client, who accepted, after we visited it with the board of directors, to go beyond the classical type of classroom pavilion. We transform a teaching building into a learning landscape, where 11 buildings are condensed in a square shape, protecting the interior from glare and heat, defining the in-between shaded spaces. As we approach to the center, spaces begin to expand and define the main gathering places. This is the space where students have a feeling of belonging. It allows informal learning and contributes to a sense of community. This is the free space we wanted to show in Venice. We decided to show at the Corderia the intangible values that shape the free space. Not a model, not plans, no representations. Only what is intangible. The Venetian light is filtered through the day by the lattice panels formwork, while a day-long video shows the equatorial light of Piura projected over a Venetian wall. That's it.
Thank you, Sandra.
You're welcome.
I don't know if the sense of surprise is going to continue with the working of the images, but I'm sure you're not going to use that, Mario, are you? Mario.
Bene, allora grazie anche da parte mia per questa occasione di parlare dell'insegnamento dell'architettura. Io ho avuto a metà degli anni 90 un'occasione straordinaria nel mio paese, la Svizzera. Vi è nata la possibilità politica e culturale di creare una nuova scuola d'architettura. E io ho fatto il programma di questa scuola e vi parlerò di come appunto ho pensato di poter, all'interno delle contraddizioni del nostro tempo, fare una scuola. In Svizzera esistevano già 3 scuole d'architettura, quella di Zurigo con una grande tradizione post-Bauhaus, razionale, quella di Rozana, nata sulla scia della francese, dei problemi sociologici, dei problemi della semiologia, dell'immagine, e in questo caso si presentava la possibilità di fare una nuova scuola di lingua italiana e quindi di dare un nuovo carattere. In realtà il mio progetto chiedeva di lasciare le scuole così come sussistevano in quel momento e creare una nuova scuola di architettura che doveva in un certo senso essere complementare alle 2 scuole già esistenti. E allora uno dei pensieri che sorreggono questa scuola è che è una equazione che non si può presentare, ma molto semplice. Per affrontare la complessità della cultura contemporanea, per affrontare la rapidità delle trasformazioni in corso, l'architetto ha bisogno di più discipline umanistiche che non di discipline tecniche. Questo detto così pareva semplice, ha stravolto ad esempio tutto il trend del Politecnico di Zurigo che stava moltiplicando l'insegnamento della logica, della matematica, dei computer, che sempre più correvano a far sì che ci fossero delle soluzioni. Noi invece abbiamo detto che la buona scuola non deve dare soluzioni. La buona scuola deve dare i problemi, deve sollecitare i problemi, deve sollecitare gli interrogativi. E allora abbiamo disegnato un profilo su 6 anni, 5 di insegnamenti e 1 obbligatorio di pratica, dove il programma dei corsi veniva piegato al massimo delle possibilità per far sì che il pensiero, che la disciplina umanistica entrasse nel programma di scuola di insegnamento. Allora abbiamo fatto una scuola molto semplice con 4 discipline prettamente di scienze umane, 4 di scienze tecniche e in mezzo abbiamo messo il progetto. Quelle di scienze umane era abbastanza semplice, però le abbiamo potenziate. Abbiamo cominciato con la storia del pensiero. Le idee sono degli elementi fondamentali, bisogna insegnare anche le idee. E allora abbiamo fatto 5 anni di filosofia. La storia del pensiero è più importante che la tecnica. 5 anni di filosofia dove la storia del pensiero va in forme diverse, poi dipenderà dai professori, ma ognuno porta il contributo delle idee che hanno sorretto la costruzione dello spazio di vita dell'uomo. Poi abbiamo fatto la storia, un altro filone, la storia dell'arte, perché l'arte ha nutrito lo spazio di vita degli uomini, e un terzo la storia dell'architettura, perché è una scuola di architettura, vista in forme molto diverse, sempre durante i 5 anni e durante le ottiche diverse anche dei professori. E l'ultimo, abbiamo introdotto la storia del territorio. Il territorio prima della presenza toccata dall'uomo, quindi il territorio naturale, e poi con Leonardo Benevolo abbiamo chiamato la storia delle trasformazioni del territorio. Quindi le idee, l'arte, l'architettura e il territorio come elementi di base. Poi abbiamo toccato le 4 discipline invece che sono più tecniche, che sono la matematica, che sono le strutture, la statica, che sono i materiali e che sono l'ecologia. E gli abbiamo dato un'accezione tutta umanistica. Abbiamo chiamato un ricercatore molto bravo di Boccum, un matematico, e abbiamo detto: tu vieni a insegnare la matematica, ma noi non vogliamo risolvere noi i problemi della matematica. I problemi l'architetto li fa risolvere dagli ingegneri del traffico, dell'ingegnere civile, dell'ingegnere statico. Noi vogliamo capire però la matematica attraverso le idee. Vogliamo che l'architetto abbia consapevolezza delle idee della matematica. Cosa sorregge la razionalità e il calcolo. La stessa roba abbiamo fatto per l'insegnamento della statica, della struttura, come sta in piedi. E il primo corso, con un giovane ingegnere molto bravo, tu fai un corso e spieghi come, perché, quali sono le leggi che fanno che l'uomo possa stare in piedi. Il carico dell'uomo come fa a scaricare il peso, il movimento, il trasporto al suolo. E questo ha fatto un corso stupendo che ha insegnato moltissimo come ci sono i principi della gravità, i principi della tensione, e i principi, ma partendo da una dimensione umanistica, addirittura dall'uomo. Poi abbiamo chiamato come terzo elemento per i materiali: non ci interessa il materiale dal punto di vista biologico, vogliamo capire i materiali nella loro forma espressiva, nella loro resistenza, ma cosa servono, come sono i materiali, partendo dalla luce e poi la materia fisica, e quindi anche in questa accezione abbiamo portato un'ottica umanistica sulla forma dei materiali che si vengono a usare. E da ultimo l'ecologia. L'ecologia era studiata a Zurigo come trasmissione termica del calore. La finestra più ecologica era quella che resisteva meglio alla comunicazione tra il freddo e il caldo. E ho detto no, abbiamo cambiato il nome, abbiamo detto l'ecologia si deve chiamare ecologia umana, e capire perché l'uomo, che cos'è l'uomo oggi sulla Terra, di fronte all'universo, di fronte alla natura, ma anche di fronte ai suoi simili. E abbiamo chiamato Albert Jacquard, un biologo che ha parlato dei problemi dell'uomo, che cos'è l'uomo sulla Terra. Ecco, stravolgendo queste materie di base abbiamo creato un nuovo profilo di studi, dove ovviamente il centro di della storia del pensiero, della storia della tecnica, resta il progetto. Il progetto è l'attività fondamentale, più del 50% di tempo di tutte le materie, e resta l'elemento di fondo. Cosa abbiamo imparato da questa esperienza, che è ancora in corso, che è bellissima perché porta la centralità dell'uomo dal punto di vista perfino dello studio della tecnica, dell'utilizzazione dei materiali, della velocità, ritorna l'uomo e non le funzioni dell'uomo. i problemi piuttosto che le soluzioni. Forse posso dire per concludere che abbiamo capito una cosa molto particolare, che forse dà anche da pensare agli architetti, e cioè che l'architettura, come la intendiamo noi, come forma espressiva della storia del proprio tempo, l'architettura dà forma alla storia dell'antichità, del Medioevo, del Rinascimento, del Barocco, su fino oggi. Che forma dà l'architettura alle contraddizioni, al vivere del nostro tempo? E l'architetto deve dare questa risposta. E per l'insegnamento abbiamo capito che, un po' paradossalmente per una scuola, ma che l'architettura non la si può insegnare, però parallelamente l'architettura la si può imparare. Ecco, nell'interno di questo spazio tra il fatto che non si può insegnare l'architettura, però si può insegnare la storia dell'architettura, la tecnica dell'architettura, la teoria dell'architettura, la si può insegnare, ma l'architettura in sé, che è una Weltanschauung, è una visione filosofica dell'essere oggi sulla Terra e dare delle risposte che sono tutte di grande spiritualità, che vanno al di là della risposta tecnica funzionale, abbiamo capito che l'architettura la si può imparare nell'emulazione degli studenti fra di loro, nella figura importante del docente, dell'architetto che porta la sua esperienza, e quindi all'interno di questo paradosso che l'architettura non la si può insegnare ma la si può imparare, abbiamo fondato questa scuola che adesso ha già dato 20 anni di attività.
Thank you, Mario.
It's hard to move on because you feel that everybody is just starting, but that's the nature of this event. So if we can move on to Níall, McLaughlin.
Can we turn the lights right down so the slides are visible? I think that would be really helpful.
Good idea.
Right down. I believe that architecture is an act of public reasoning, and it takes a form of material and spatial practice. And if architecture is a form of public reasoning, then I think that design should also constitute a form of public reasoning. And that's why I've called this lecture, or this talk, Drawing Together. I want to begin with the individual. Each of our students is asked to come to the site and to engage themselves in a profound relationship with the site, bringing tools with them which will allow them to understand the site in deeper and more direct ways, and to move from that into some form of notation that allows them to understand the range of experience which they've had of the project. These are individual drawings in which the student is trying to understand for themselves. But quickly, what we do as a group is to draw together. For the English phrase drawing together can talk about the act of drawing itself, but also drawing together means becoming closer to each other. And this sense of drawing and working together, this is a piece made by all of my students, moving from their individual work into a collective piece, allows them to find a completely different understanding of each other and their own projects. And then they can move back into much more physical and visceral, independent expressions of the work that they're doing. I want to talk about one project which my students did. It's called Ghost Chapel. One of the things I say is that architectural education cannot be considered as a 5 or 7 year warming up for the real task of architecture. It must constitute a form of practice in itself, and that form of practice has to find a way of speaking to society in terms which are critically engaging with the real tasks of society. This is one project which we did. We set the students a problem of these two gables, both from the 7th century, one in the west of Ireland and one in Japan. And we asked how could these completely independent forms have achieved such similarity in terms of their tectonic expression. And the other thing we asked them to think about is how these two buildings embody time in different ways. The students worked together to make a building called the Ghost Chapel, and one simple intuition they had was that they could take all of the stones out of the stone building and make a building just out of the joints. They work together. What we find out is that some of them are fantastic draftsmen, some of them are fantastic digital, some of them are great fundraisers, some of them are the builders. They form a team and a kind of collective mind. That's important to me. Every single stone from the chapel was made out of polystyrene from robots in the Bartlett where I teach. And then the mortar joints in between were filled up and blown out, so we ended up with a lacework only of the mortar joints. And they took it to the west of Ireland. Sorry, they took it to the west of Ireland. The slides are flipping around. They took it to the west of Ireland and put it on the shore across from the other building. And then on days of festival, the building is bedecked with a cloth made from dye from the lichen on the site. A project which we did together a number of years ago in my old school, I was asked to come and make a piece, and we made a drawing floor. The medieval masons used to draw on plaster on the floor. We got a group of 4 students from the school and 4 architects from my practice, and we drew together for a week. It was an act of meditation on a building which we were in the middle of designing and just about to construct. The point about the room was it wasn't simply the drawing, but the fact that people from the city and from the school came to speak to us about the project over the whole week. So it was a way of opening up the project in its design to a kind of public dialogue. The thing I had forgotten about drawing when you draw on a plaster floor is the ache in your arm that starts with your thumb and goes right up to the shoulder and into the neck. At the end of the week, we were utterly exhausted. But this is what we made. You can see the room from above and all of us working together, people coming to stand in the doorways and to talk to us about our family, our architecture, or the city. One nice thing about this project is I'm asked, what did it achieve? I can tell you 2 of the people in the picture got married. And this is what we would have been looking up at above the floor if we had turned over. This is the finished ceiling of the building for which that was the plan. One of the things I'm interested in is the idea of a lifelong learning. And what we have done is to create, out of all of my ex-students and my staff who've left the office to form their own practices, a mutual group, and we educate each other. I have things that grey hair can tell you, and they have things that I couldn't possibly understand, and we find a way of talking to each other. I had finished a project and made this drawing in the fashion of Aldo Rossi, a drawing after the project, to try and understand things about the project I could only have learnt from making it. And from that, we developed, the building was for people with dementia, and from that, we developed an interest in thinking about dementia and thinking about finding ways of drawing the experiences of people with dementia. This is my 20-year teaching partner, Yoria, and the 2 of us try to find ways of drawing together to witness the experience of dementia. What we ended up doing was asking architects who had studied with us, who had their own practices, to come and draw together with us for a month. We made nearly 2,000 drawings, and it was a collective act in which we learned how to draw these experiences by working with each other. And you can see the principle of it, which is expressed conceptually here. Each drawing hand is one person trying to witness the world in terms of their own experience. Michiko is drawing her father waking up in the morning. He has dementia, and trying to understand what it is that he is experiencing as he awakes. Sometimes when there are communal acts like dining or playing together, we would need to draw together. And so the act of drawing became something in which we discovered that our drawings became more like each other the more that we drew. And we could make these great molecules of drawing with more and more people becoming involved in the act of drawing. And each time we finished a drawing, we would throw it on the floor to make a carpet of drawings, which we had to try to understand and to work with. It was a physical act. For example, when we were trying to draw people dancing, Claire from Ireland had to teach Michiko from Japan how to do Irish dancing, and we did it on the drawings. And here's the drawing they did together afterwards, people dancing together in the room. When we came to bring the piece together, we threw these drawings down on the floor digitally, as though throwing the drawing on the floor was an act of making the world. And the world comes into bloom and has different seasons. And bit by bit, we built up the whole of the building through thousands of different experiences. And this is what we had on the floor of the Biennale. The idea is that the architectural plan can contain multitudes of experience and therefore must be considered in that sense. All of architecture contains multitudes, and that brings us back to the idea of architecture being a public act, and therefore the design and consideration of architecture being a kind of public performance. The last piece I want to speak about is a piece which we did for this year's Biennale for free space. And I want to say that for me, drawing and making itself can be conceived as a kind of free space. Look at these people here together dancing in the land framed by buildings. This is what architecture is. And in some way, the act of making architecture has to in some way mirror this or represent it. This is us in our office trying to think how we might do the project for the Biennale. I insist that what you're looking at in this image is one mind. I believe in the idea of embodied cognition, that our minds do not exist as separate things, but can only exist as they are physically embodied in the world. And therefore the 6 of us together on the stage for this afternoon constitute one mind. And the 200 of us in this lecture theatre constitute an extension of that one mind. And this to me is very important in terms of thinking about architecture. We took 6 of our buildings and took the human calendars of each building. One was for sport, one for religion, one for education, one for dining. And we made the calendars of each building. So on this date here in August the 4th, 14th, on a Saturday, you can see what fish is being served, what rugby teams are playing, what religious services are going on, what lectures are in the education building. And we made that a fixed calendar around the edge of the building. And then we threw that in the center onto a map of the cosmos. And here are carpenters and architects working together to create the piece. I want to just show you quickly each of the buildings so you understand the relationship between the building as a fixed frame through which everything from light to weather to meaning to history to use pass as fugitive and changeable things, but the frame is always fixed. So the first one is a chapel in Oxford, and here is the building. And the second one is a building for rugby players in Limerick in the west of Ireland, and the space on top of that building, which has not been built yet, will look like this. And the next one is a tiny choir school in Cambridge for musicians to sing together, and it's just starting on site this week, and it will eventually look at this, made completely from load-bearing stone. And built 10 years ago, a cafe for fishermen on the end of a pier in the south coast of England. The old concrete pier is beneath, and the timber building is above it. And here are the fishermen crouched down in winter with the sheltering cafe overhead. A lecture theatre in Oxford, which was just finished recently, an amphitheatre, and here is the finished space with its ceiling and the stone fins which surround it. And finally, a building which was opened yesterday, which is a new town hall and viewing tower for a castle in the north of England. And I don't have architectural pictures yet, but this is the one I snapped on my iPhone yesterday. Thank you very much. This is the film of the world turning as the sun rises and sets, and you see the light expressing the movement of things through the fixed frames of the building.
Thank you, Níall. Thank you so much. Robert, do you want to keep the lights down or do you want them up? You want to keep them down?
Can we keep the lights down as they were in the all? So I've titled my presentation, Demanding Presence, Unrealized Designs as the Sites for Academic Studio Projects. I'm going to illustrate the talk with 9 examples from studios over the last 10 years. But I'd like to begin with a quote from Louis Kahn, which is in reference to his own many, many unbuilt works, about which he remained optimistic. He said, "That which is not built is not really lost. Once its value is established, its demand for presence is undeniable. It is merely waiting for the right circumstances." That, I think, has been proven to be true with the recent realization, miraculously, of the Franklin Delano Roosevelt Memorial in New York, more than 40 years after he designed it. Oh dear. I overloaded it, what can I say? All right, here we go. We try again, okay. Architectural historians, critics, practitioners, and academics have generally tended to give little attention to unbuilt architectural designs, being either unwilling or, that's very exciting. That's not my sound effect. Either being unwilling or unable to recognize their theoretical insights, generative potential, or critical importance in an architect's development as a designer. Yet when we study, Yet when we study the life work of an architect, including architects who have an ongoing practice, we find that it is often in the pivotal but almost never examined unbuilt projects that the architect first evolved the fundamental ordering concepts that will later form the foundation for their more famous or well-known built works. It's my contention that the loss of our disciplinary history constituted by the failure of educators, practitioners, critics, and historians to study and learn from these transformative works, which, as Kahn said, were unrealized only by chance and circumstance, is intellectually and culturally unsustainable. The insights and constructive concepts embodied in unbuilt designs must be re-engaged by the discipline of architecture. In an attempt to address the absence of a deeper understanding of unbuilt designs by modern architects whose built works have been accorded canonical status, once each year at my university I've taught an academic studio that assumes that an unbuilt work by a modern master was in fact built as they designed it in the years that it was designed, and to which I asked the students to design an addition now, 50 or more years later. Okay. The students begin by constructing a model and drawings of the unbuilt work, so that the studio also involves disciplinary research and documentation of projects that often were never projects that often were never completed. In the case, say, of Louis Kahn, who, when a project was no longer live, you could say, he just stopped working on it, never continued working on it. Architects and faculty participating on the jury are invariably unfamiliar with these unbuilt works, and so that the education may be said to extend beyond the university in that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And I think people's patience is being stretched a little, so thank you for bearing with it. But we were speaking last night about Robin Evans, who came to speak in Dublin many years ago, and his images, he had 2 projectors, and the wrong image kept coming up with its partner image, and he started to use that as a way of thinking. So maybe we can think about it as a way of thinking. Rozana.
Thank you. I need to be sure that I can change the images, so I think I might. Yeah, thank you. I see buildings as knowledge structures, and as such, the territories connected and defined through architectural design are spaces for the interpretation of knowledge, as well as places of collective memory and understanding. These are the type of drawings that we do at the office. As a practitioner, I explore how architectural forms materialize meaningful structures in place. As a scholar, I reflect upon the syntax, context, text, and subtexts. Design-wise, I'm mostly interested in placemaking by rediscovering the frames that connect us. The practice of teaching, to me, is a two-way street where experience meets imagination. It not only takes place between scholar and student within an institution, but also in the studio among collaborators between client and architect, urbanscape and designer. In the office, design work goes hand in hand with research efforts. Every project is an opportunity for interdisciplinary research development. We work on artistic resignifications of space, urban mobility, housing, and the public domain. We are particularly drawn to redraw. Oh, I got stuck again. Sorry. We're particularly drawn to redrawing, to redeveloping the language we use to communicate design. Representation in architecture is not only a medium of conveying meaningful narrative of space, but also of resignifying our connections to space. Therefore, the literature we produce is integral to the design process and inseparable from the translation of our ideas into concrete forms. Our most recent book, Common Spaces in Social Housing Units, published as part of our piece Stand Ground in this Biennale edition, is an example of how the conceptual approach to a family of projects stemmed from the development of a new design language. The book reworks typographical arrangements and the post-it format as a methodology. The pink post-its are the support for graphic aphorisms paired to maximums, which concisely convey a series of observations and design solutions for public space development. The post-it series feature recurrent objects which are resignified through the lens of various themes arrayed in alphabetical order. The aim of this pink handbook is compiling a series of principles and effective tactics that activate or free a process of placemaking in 3 projects we have done in public space. This is one of the first projects we did. It's called Common Unity, and when we first got there, everything was gated. There were so many barriers, and we worked with the community and not only for the community to open the spaces and create a common ground. The second project, it's called Rooftop Court, which we also did. They only asked us to give them a roof, and we gave them more than a roof. We did in between the columns the program, and we put almost a whole community center. So we usually as architects give them more than what people ask. This is very important for us. This last project, it's called Fresnillo Playground, and it also had a barrier. It was in a very risky place, in one of the most violent ridden places in Mexico, in Zacatecas, and we created a whole playground with very simple elements using the slopes that there were already there, and now there are more than 100 kids playing. So for us, again, the community is very important. In this year Venice Biennale Free Space, our piece Stand Ground invited people to imagine a place-making process standing by the following principles of our design manifesto that we created from the ideas of these 3 projects that you just saw. Free space in Spanish is a play on words. It means libera espacio, espacio libre. So we work with these words to create our piece. And we created the manifesto with these 7 principles. Seek content in context, change barriers into boundaries, shift spatial perception, approach the landscape as the program, resignify materials, work with temporality, hold beauty as a basic right. So we use this manifesto to design our piece Stand Ground. We paved the exhibition floor with a 1-to-1 reproduction of the Arsenal wall in recycled Venetian brick. On the original wall, a screen projected in real time the activity of the public space behind the barrier. The reinterpretation of the wall as common ground communicated public space with private space. The barrier became a boundary. The exhibition area shifted the traditional relationship of museal spaces to spectators as it invited to touch, in fact, walk over the piece. The walkable wall floor promoted a tactile, haptic experience of space. On the one hand, stand ground opened up the exhibit space to the urban horizon of Venice. It created a fluid space which allowed playful communication between spaces in the present tense. Whatever occurred or recurred on both sides of that effaced wall became the program of the space, of the piece. On the other hand, the mediatized nature of the piece, the projector on screen, deconstructed the simulacra and illusions of freedom in our current society, which lives vicariously in virtual spaces under constant surveillance. The interface is really a way to postpone the present. As simple as it sounds, projecting the street was an unbelievable crusade because of all the permits, norms, and restrictions in place. Projecting public space impinges on issues of security and privacy. So in a way, we discover how hard it is to remove any wall. All the tacit or explicit conventions enforced to keep a wall in place. It was a very valuable process where we unlearn assumptions. This is particularly relevant at a moment in which political leaders boast capacity to build the most wonderful walls ever. But to my studio, the beauty and wonder of architectural design resides in its capacity to perform as creative and strategic thinking aimed at offering elegant and human solutions to complex human problems. Thank you very much.
I have to say thank you to each and every one of you for a really rich 5 minutes each. And I just want to maybe call out some words or notes that I wrote down and then ask each person to comment on one particular question I have. Sandra started speaking about light and shadow and the elemental qualities of architecture, not only that, but particularly that. And Mario gave us a wonderful synopsis on ideas behind architectural education and talked about a humanistic discipline and that there's no need for solutions, that what we need as architects is to ask the right questions. Níall asked made a number of statements, drawing together and words like losing myself, that we're not separate minds, that we're 6 people with one mind, so to speak. Words I wrote down from Robert were that buildings have a demanding presence, whether built or unbuilt. And Rosana talks about standing ground and removing walls. And I would just like maybe to use the theme that Níall has introduced, that we're not 6 individuals here, but that we are one mind. And could I just ask each person what they think they have connected with in what the other has spoken? If there was one thing which might bring us together as one mind, what might it be? And maybe I'll just start with Níall because you're first on my left, and just maybe comment on that.
Thank you. I suppose in a situation like this, my instinct is just to listen to other architects speaking and to try and read them through the combination of their words and their slides. And it's interesting, I don't know the work of the practices, with the exception of the group on this side. I don't know the work of the practices very well. But But it seemed to me that I was comparing how I think I set out my own stall with others. So, for example, Rozana, when I was interested that both of us chose to show a lot of sketches and drawings, walls full of. So the process of the project coming about seemed to be presented in a very similar way. Although I realize that our minds are completely different in that I think the square post-it notes are really interesting because on one hand they have the sense of informality as though you were merely throwing out ideas, but your work is primarily conceptual, and so the squares themselves are these very finite forms which when they accumulate together into a grid, it gives a sense that each idea is quite contained and preconceived in its way. So although we were showing process work, I sensed that the instinct of mine was is how you come on an idea through a physical mental process, while yours, there was a sense that the idea is conceptually determined, and the way that you represented that, I mean, very beautiful images of the work laid out, but the way that you represented that was quite different. And I found that very interesting. I thought that the image that I absolutely loved from yours was all of the students together in that one space drawing. And that sense of going to buildings and learning from the direct experience of the buildings. And what I really enjoyed in that was the way that you seemed to speak as a teacher to begin with, and then you were speaking as someone who was learning from another part of this collective mind. And so my favorite sense of architecture as each of us picking up a stitch and passing on a stitch was, I thought, embodied really beautifully in the combination of your teaching practice and your building practice, and I thought it was a lovely example of the two. I think that I was fascinated that Robert and I spoke over lunch about the book that he's writing at the moment, and I had a sense of him from that. But the idea that your student projects are so bound into the idea that precedent is such a teacher. I was fascinated by some of I wanted to look longer at some of the projects where the students seemed to have gone completely off-piste in relation to the piece that they were extending or developing. And I wanted to, I was saying, stop, can I ask more about that project? But I'm very interested in that sense. When I was studying at UCD, there was always a sense that architecture begins in precedent. It begins in the collective horde of forms that already exist, that you interrogate and understand. But when I went to London to teach in places like the Bartlett under people like Peter Cook, he thought the precedent was useless. And he said it was a contaminant, and that the student should really fall back on the innocence of their own mind, on their own subjectivity. And I think that contrast between the sense of architecture being an extension of a conversation which is happening over time with others and peers, and that you both emulate something and change it in emulating it as one form of conversation. And the other one, which has a currency, is the idea that all of that should be avoided in the pursuit of originality or in the pursuit of a kind of creative innocence. So you fell very firmly in the first camp, but I found that fascinating. And I suppose for Mario, for me, it was an enormous pleasure to be on the stage with Mario, because when I was a student, I was poring over his drawings, and that was back in 1983 or 1984. To hear that discussion of architectural education from someone who had been implicitly part of my education by extension was a huge privilege. But the understanding also that architecture comes from and is a material manifestation of a deeper human culture, which involves all of the humanities, involves geometry and history and materials and light and so on. For me, that was an absolutely beautiful description of what architecture is. Thank you. It's quite hard to do 5, but or 4.
You've done them all, though. Yeah, it's fantastic, Níall. Do you mind? I hope you don't mind. I'm just going to go around the room. Yeah. I'm just going to go around the room one by one. Is that okay?
Ovviamente anche per me è molto difficile. Sì. Ma vorrei cominciare dicendo che mi ha molto impressionato, sentendo i colleghi, le cose che la grande varietà degli approcci possibili attraverso il progetto. Il progetto è come un vaso infinito che accoglie gli sguardi, le preoccupazioni, le ansie di tutti noi. E io ho imparato moltissimo vedendo come ognuno focalizza il problema del progetto, cioè il progetto porta con sé l'idea della speranza, una speranza per una vita, per l'organizzazione di uno spazio migliore. E quante forme diverse sono possibili. E allora intanto che sentivo queste osservazioni ho detto: ma che cos'è che ci lega? Cos'è che fa che noi siamo degli architetti? E mi sembra di individuare che ognuno di noi all'interno della propria lettura, della propria interpretazione che ha dato, molto onesta, molto personale, quindi molto autentica, ci siano delle costanti. Ho fatto giù 2 o 3 nomi. Primo, la luce. La luce come generatrice dello spazio mi sembra che sia un denominatore comune. La luce per l'architetto è la generatrice dello spazio. Senza luce questo spazio scompare. Quindi la luce come lettura in forme diverse di un elemento fondante l'architettura. Secondo, la gravità. Il fatto che tutte le architetture del mondo trasmettono i carichi al suolo, in forme diverse, ma è l'opposto dell'aereo, è l'opposto di qualcosa che vola. L'architettura si radica alla terra, la terra diventa la terra madre, con la quale tutto il bello, il brutto, le funzioni, la complessità, la pace viene trasmessa al suolo. E allora attraverso questo si possono incominciare a vedere gli elementi dell'architettura, che sono i limiti. I muri tracciano dei limiti, sempre. Ho sentito riferimento alle mura politiche. No, noi vogliamo che anche le mura diventano dei ponti. Il muro può parlare dell'infinito anche, perché crea una chiave di interpretazione dove il limite offre al fruitore quello che esiste oltre il limite. E questo è un altro fatto che mi sembra leghino questa parte. E forse c'è un qualcosa di non detto, che però mi è sembrato di cogliere nei diversi aspetti, che è quello che si può chiamare in forme diverse la storia, o forse meglio il passato, o forse ancora meglio il territorio della memoria. Il territorio della memoria, il passato come un amico, diceva Louis Kahn, il territorio della memoria è un'entità, io credo, che per l'architetto è fondamentale, molto più importante della funzione, molto più importante della tecnica, perché fa sì che il passato diventi una parte del presente. Noi costruiamo perché abbiamo una storia dell'umanità che ci ha insegnato, che ha dato significati diversi agli elementi architettonici, ma anche alle grandi istituzioni dell'uomo. E il vero nostro compito è quello di oggi capire quali sono i valori che dobbiamo testimoniare con il fatto costruito.
Robert, or Roberto as we call you in Venice.
All I can say is I'm glad I'm not last on this one, so it's getting increasingly difficult. Because I think in order not to repeat, we'll just be in silence shortly. One of the things that struck me, because of my focus, is a curiosity, because the Biennale, quite rightly, emphasizes built work, and that has been a long tradition here. And the presentations today also involved built work, either built work of the architects or built work by other architects, with the exception of mine, perhaps. But I found myself struck by a curiosity to find out about the unbuilt projects of the other 4 architects on the stage. I know about yours because they're in my book, but because I really believe that as a practitioner, you invest equal amount of energy into the unbuilt project, because as Khan said, you never know whether it will actually come. And eventually he chalks it up to circumstance, which for him is a very important thing. We are at the mercy of circumstance. And some of Khan's most favored projects, particularly the Mikveh Israel synagogue in Philadelphia, his hometown, which was never built, was a severe disappointment to him, and he worked on it for 12 years. And I think he would have traded perhaps other projects that were built for that if he could have gotten it built. So I think that I'm interested always in the part of our practice that in general is hidden. If we put it in the book, we put it in the back of the book. And I think actually it would do me good, but it would do all of us good to focus perhaps on the ideas that are still there and awaiting, as Khan says, they're demanding presence. They're waiting for the right circumstance. I also think that the unbuilt projects tend to have the equal measure, if not even sometimes more, and perhaps that's one of the reasons they were not realized, of what we call free space, or the kind of generosity, a notion about architecture that needs to do far more than just solve a functional program in the way that the work that was shown today clearly does. And I think that's another reason why perhaps the unbuilt works of our presenters are something that I would be interested in. So.
I will start by saying that I forgot to put in my presentation some images about Mario Botta's houses that influences a lot me as a student, because we were discovering the work of this master, the architect, and we were also discovering how architecture can relate with the territory. And then we went, when we were working in Paris, we went visiting the Ticino area and looking for those examples that were relating architecture with territory in a very like new way or new approach. So it was also I was impacted about the structure of the school when Mario was telling that one very important part was the history of thinking, and that the students have 5 years of this history, so they can learn about really the ideas and the importance of asking the right questions or finding the problems. I think that's as in this profession, we have always to be like very concerned about asking the right questions. And it's true that a lot of unknown projects are all the competition we have lost. there constitute projects that we believe in, but I just want to talk about when we finish a competition, we are sure that our project is the best and that we will win. But when we did the UTEC competition in Lima, and we were sure our project was the right one, and it's true, when we discovered the project that Shelley and Yvonne did, we were amazed about how can be really, there are ways, there are times where we don't have the right answer, and they did an extraordinary work with this project that was very difficult because of the very little space or plot we had for this vertical campus. No? So then we learned that, okay, all these unbuilt projects, when they don't arrive to a reality, they are just like ideas that have to be improved. They're like just starting points, but they are not like finished ideas. No, so. We learn how to lose in a competition. And I think the work of Rosana talk about the micro-territory that it's working in the city with public space, and it's really, we admire your work and how the sensitivity that you had to work with public space and these boundaries, trying to erase boundaries, no? And I think it's thing that I appreciate a lot, and I was also very pleased to saw Níall's work of teaching with a lot of drawings, and I think the drawing as a way to connect hand, mind, and material is really something we all do as architects, and is. I was also impressed by the collective drawings. So you were, it's like this, the philosophy you were talking about, one mind, so one drawing, collective drawing, and I think that's interesting for the students to find this, try to build something together. No?
So, many things have been said. But I would like to call it, this idea of one mind, the exquisite corpse, or cadáver exquisito, that we start building with one idea, the other, and then we can do something together. That would be really interesting. But for me, after hearing all the presentations, I think that one of the aspects of redrawing or doing models is very important, because I think it's a way of transforming reality. It's a way that we can start seeing with these new eyes, like an active gaze, the idea of architecture, and going deeply and looking into the things that they're invisible when we see them just very fast, but when we start redrawing or doing this type of models, the invisible becomes visible. And for me, I think that's very important. That's why we always in the office try to do these drawings, because we start looking all these other parts that it's not very easy to see. So I think that we need new eyes, we need a new way of seeing architecture, and I think that it's not only with our eyes, but it's also with our body, with our skin, and it has to be more experience and sensorial, even if they're unbuilt. They can be built or unbuilt, but I think that we have to work more with our bodies and not only with our eyes.
I would like the lights to be turned down up here and turn the lights on the audience, and hopefully we'll have one or more questions. But I suppose while we're doing that, if it takes some time, I'd just like to say that I found this session really fantastically enriching, and I'm really intrigued by this thing of what is it that brings us together, and also the use of words, creative innocence, or thinking in a new way, or we have to have new eyes, or I think it was Mario who says we have to have hope. And in a way, I'm just wondering, and we often talk about this, is the way that we all experience the practice of architecture is so collaborative and such a collective endeavor, and yet the crediting or presentation of architecture is always in the end related to one or two people, so that students inevitably, or the public inevitably, think about the person, the firm, the individual, and that presentation of the making of architecture is untrue. And what do we, or what can we do as a way of correcting that perception, that it's not actually a narcissistic act of the individual? And why is it that this has been promoted, and why is it that this has happened? And I'm always really interested when you go around a gallery and you see anonymous, and it's a beautiful thing, and you don't know who has done it. And so it is something that I think is a miscommunication of the practice of architecture. And Mario is dying to say something, so I'll hand you.
Sì, due osservazioni. A proposito dell'osservazione di Robert sui progetti non realizzati. La premessa è che anch'io ho i cassetti strapieni di progetti non realizzati. Ogni tanto, alla domenica, quando è chiuso lo studio, a me piace girare nell'atelier e guardare nei cassetti gli amori mancati, perché un progetto non realizzato è un amore fallito, è qualcosa nel quale avevamo scommesso moltissimo e poi non l'abbiamo fatto, non abbiamo potuto farlo. Questa è una prima osservazione. La seconda è un'osservazione di Kahn. Kahn, quando qui a Venezia l'abbiamo incontrato, ha cominciato col dire una conferenza dicendo: cari ragazzi, per prima cosa voglio dirvi che l'architettura non esiste. Ciò che esiste è l'opera di architettura, e l'opera di architettura parla al di là dell'idea dell'architetto, interpreta la cultura di quel momento, interpreta le speranze della collettività, interpreta i desideri anche proibiti che abbiamo. Per cui dobbiamo avere molta umiltà noi architetti, perché le nostre opere si arricchiscono del lavoro degli operai, delle maestranze, degli artigiani, che portano il loro sapere antichissimo per realizzare qualcosa che noi abbiamo disegnato. Da questo punto di vista quindi dobbiamo, secondo me, domandarci perché un nostro progetto non è stato costruito e fare l'autocolpa, fare l'autocritica. Però dobbiamo anche domandarci perché la collettività non l'ha meritato, perché la società non l'ha voluto. E allora qui a Venezia abbiamo 3 grossi progetti, Wright, Le Corbusier e Kahn, che la città, che Venezia non ha meritato. Era un'offerta, il progetto d'architettura è un'offerta straordinaria, che contiene un pezzo di futuro. E in quel caso lì la Venezia politica, la Venezia sociale, la Venezia economica non l'hanno voluto. Allora il nostro compito utopico, il nostro compito è l'ultima cosa che dobbiamo abbandonare, perché noi dovremo continuare a fare progetti, anche se questi progetti dovessero essere tutti non realizzati. Un'ultima osservazione, scusami, però mi è venuto in mente un'osservazione di un amico che è anche un filosofo, architetto, recentemente mancato, recentemente morto, che è Paul Virilio. Paul Virilio è un architetto urbanista francese che ha lavorato molto a Ginevra e ha scritto molto sulla una critica al moderno, alla guerra, alle armi di distruzione, alle catastrofi come strutture necessarie perfino, no? E lui osserva come la rapidità, l'urgenza e il gran correre delle trasformazioni che noi facciamo oggi siano anche un vettore che si perpetua, un vettore dell'oblio. Con più noi corriamo, con più noi dimentichiamo. Allora noi architetti abbiamo il compito di far sì che la memoria del grande passato ritorni anche nei progetti contemporanei.
I'm quite interested in Louis Kahn's insistence on the work of architecture rather than architecture. And it seemed to me, listening to it, as though if you could imagine the broad practice of architecture across time as being a mosaic, he's insisting on the particular quality of every single piece of glass. And when I'm encouraging students to do work which they know will never be built, I'm insisting that that forms and constitutes a kind of architectural practice. And when I'm trying to comfort myself on a Sunday about the projects that I haven't had built, I often say, well, perhaps in ways that I don't know and can't predict, that broken stitch that I've left there will form the ground for another stitch over there at some other place or time. And so I like to think of the broad practice of architecture, which can be made of unbuilt sketches and realized projects and buildings that were once beautiful but are ruined or completely lost. They're all at some place in that tapestry. And they all exist as things that can not simply be a stitch in themselves, but can ramify and affect other parts of the tapestry. And for me, it's the continuity of architectural practice that I'm interested in, that the idea of it being a public form of reasoning that exists across time, and perhaps going back to that idea of drawing together. Who knows what architectural idea you brought into the world? It didn't turn into that particular work of architecture, but perhaps at some other time it will realize something that you couldn't have imagined but contains a bit of you.
I think that's a lovely idea. I suppose also we all know as people who teach that there are projects that students have made which are forever in our minds and are built and have changed the way that we think or the way that we read a city or read a place. But I realize we're going a bit over time, and I'm just anxious to see if there are any burning questions from the audience, given that we've had such a rich palette of ideas presented.
Thanks. Thank you.
Jerry, can you say who you are?
I've no idea after this who I am. I'm a past teacher in UCD and came here to this Biennale with some great colleagues from UCD and some very talented students who are producing things that will one day be built, I hope. I suppose the thing for me, having taught for many years, relates back to that issue about that Níall referred to, which is about reference, the Peter Cook quote about reference being contaminant. And maybe I've picked that up wrongly, but I suppose that one thing that I have always valued in architecture is learning from what's gone before in order to inform what goes after. And the kind of sense of documenting that and understanding the minds of those who have gone before has always been an important thing. And I'm wondering if, Níall, you'd like to elaborate maybe on that a wee bit. And also, I think maybe the understanding of what the canon of architecture is and has been, that it's not just about fantastic invention, but it's about considered invention. And I think what we've seen presented here and what has been discussed is that kind of wonderful sense of considered invention, the sense that architecture gives a continued sense of surprise and delight, and the creation of beautiful things in light. So thank you.
Sorry, Jerry, I'm not trying to cut you short, but I'm trying to see if there another question, because it would be nice to have whatever questions together and we just wrap them up as one mind.
Yeah. Hi,
let's say.
yeah, sorry, just one quick question. Unfortunately, it's actually quite similar to the first one in one sense.
It's unfortunate.
Well, you can make up your own minds on that. But just the question about precedent and the scale going from complete reliance on that to complete dismissal of that, and just where do you, now having thought and practice, where do you lie in that scale, and which do you think it changes project to project, where you put yourself in that scale, or do you kind of have a compass that you always steer to in terms of that scale? Thank you.
And there's a third question.
Hi. My name is Mark Price. 50 years ago, Aldo Rossi and Manfredo Tafuri argued about whether architecture could make the city a more just place, not just a more beautiful place. And is that over? Have we given up completely on the problem of commodification of the city? And can we teach students to address this? Or are we just teaching them to make beautiful spaces for cities that nobody can afford to live in?
I'm going to ask Robert to answer that.
All three at once? Yeah. Great. Well, in terms of precedent, Louis Kahn once said that if you copied Le Corbusier's design, you're a little bit of a thief. But if he has an idea about the fundamental essence of architecture, that doesn't belong to him, that belongs to all of us, and that you can avail yourself of that, which I think is a very beautiful way to think about how an architect, a practicing architect who makes forms, is in some ways not that interested in the forms of even the great architects. They are interested in the essential idea about what really matters, and then they find their own way of expressing it, their own form. I think the issue about which I'm not remembering all three questions, but maybe I'll pass it on. But I do think that at lunch we talked about the commodification of the city. We had a little bit of a conversation among us and about the difficulties of teaching students who spend an inordinate amount of time looking at images on the internet of things built and unbuilt, but often you cannot tell the difference because the unbuilt images are so convincing. I have unbuilt projects of cons in my con book that were done at the MIT Digital Design Lab, and I've had people tell me they had no idea that the Salk Institute Meeting House was built. And I said it wasn't, and they said, but you have photographs of it in your book? And I said, no, I have extremely good digital representations made by my colleague there. I think these things are connected because the architect operates in a bodily, visceral world, as Rozana said, but at the same time we are increasingly overpowered by visual things, many of which are given to us with a sense of how many other people have looked at it and therefore how popular it is, as opposed to how we personally might come to value that. And that, if it makes any difference, was actually a subject of discussion at lunch among the six of us. So.
No, I think references are very important. We must try to understand the strategies or the ideas that are behind these references. And if we can visit them, it's great, but if not, doing models and drawings can try to inform us about the ideas. I agree with Robert that we are not going to copy or make a replica of the form, but try to learn about the idea, and maybe we can try to apply this idea in our own form of expression. And in each... Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This on, Sandra, because I'm just thinking as you speak, what we found amazing watching you, I was explaining to somebody today who didn't know the work of Barclay Cruz, that you worked in Paris for 10 years?
Mm-hmm. 16.
16 years, and then went back to Peru. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to find the term you use, which is nurturing imperfection. Mm-hmm. And you spoke about, again, this is sort of thinking about precedent and Jerry's question. You felt a complete liberation moving from France back to your own country, your own place. It wasn't just to do with familiarity, but it was to do with liberation. And the fact that architecture is practiced in such a completely different way in some place like Peru, and that you seem to be able to touch the past, let's say, which Mario moves from talking about history to talking about the past, partly to do with the continuity of perhaps building culture, but also this thing of when you talked about nurturing imperfection, it just sounded like a really interesting cultural idea that you found something in the French culture and practice of architecture which was completely inhibiting in many ways, and then in your own place you can somehow navigate the past and the present much more easily. And just wondering, would you like to say something about that?
Yes, working abroad for us gave us a distance to rethink our culture and see it with other eyes, and start to appreciate things that we had they're always there, but we didn't had the time to appreciate them or to be conscious that there's a value there. So going back, we were very sensitive to look in the pre-Columbian architecture, the way they managed to do projects or build a landscape with the same logics that the territory had, and there are examples of architecture in mud that talk us about modernity and light and the way and architectural promenades and all these modern concepts, but that were there always. So we rediscovered these values, and it was also working with the climate and the landscape in Peru. Close these preoccupations that were or that became primary when we start working in Peru. So we forgot about all these preoccupations for industrialized materials and things that in Europe are sometimes too
rigid.
Yeah.
Rigid. And Rozana, can I ask you to answer the question about, are we making just beautiful spaces, or can we make a just and fair city?
Well, I was thinking about his question, and I think that, as I said in the manifesto, I think that beauty is a basic right, and I think that we don't need money to do it. In Mexico, for example, many times you think that beauty is luxury and it costs money. And we have shown them that you don't need money to do beautiful things. And people sometimes think that they don't deserve it. So when we were doing these places, they said, well, but we don't deserve this. This is for like European cities, or this is for somebody that has money. And we were saying that no, it's the opposite. We have to develop a culture where beauty can be done anywhere. And I think that in Mexico, it's a responsibility to not only create beautiful places, but the responsibility to work with the community to do these social projects that can really change the quality of life of the city, and not only of individuals. So here is where we connect the idea of collective, and I think the collective is present not only in us as architects and clients and students with us, but also with the people. And if I really like what Níall said about this public act and the public reasoning, and I think that today, if we don't work that way, mostly in our cities, in Latin America, in Mexico, it's you cannot continue doing architecture that way. No, it really has to change, and we have to believe that it's a responsibility as architects to work in this type of projects.
I know you're short of time. I just wanted to put something right. When I was speaking about teaching at the Bartlett in the 90s and Peter Cook, I wasn't quoting him when I used the word contamination. And actually, on a good day, Peter Cook is a very rich speaker about influence and history and so on. I think he can be quite complex on that subject. I think the general drift of the school was saying that students could somehow invent in a different way if the precedent of the past was removed and they were asked to fall back on their own subjectivity. I wouldn't say that was his personal opinion.
But actually, what I find very interesting is coming across people who have a completely alternative view to oneself. Where we teach in Mendrisio, for instance, there are some architects who don't believe in the idea of, well, one, who don't believe in the idea of context as or place as a basis, and think that, and make an alternative proposition, which is a very interesting and challenging proposition, which is that architecture is beyond place, and it's about the alien idea that you bring into a place that regenerates a place. Now, the same architect makes buildings which are very connected to place, but anyhow, it's always very interesting. Something you said actually at some point visiting University College Dublin, Níall, was that you felt that sometimes students are too reverential to the given, what would you call it, thesis or set of values or climate. And what's important, because there are students in the room, is that there is that thing of creative innocence, which is also important. I mean, it's not that everything has to come directly from the past or from precedent. We are dependent on the intuition and the uninformed instinct that the student brings to bear on a project. And sometimes it has a freshness and a life and can touch the core of a project more so than an experienced architect. And that's one of the reasons why I think we continue to teach. Mario teaches in the first year, and you're continually amazed by the beautiful things that first years can make, not knowing anything. So I suppose it's not to discourage students to think that history is a heavy baggage that you have to carry around as a weight on your back before you draw a line. It's something that you refer to, but each student, and each time we work with students, we have to create a climate where you and they and we believe in our own judgment and our own instinct in parallel. So we want you to feel free and happy and optimistic and not feel borne down by responsibility. And I think it's very nice when Mario says we don't need solutions. I didn't know you thought that, but anyhow, it's interesting that we don't need solutions. We just need to ask, to think so clearly, and sometimes unclearly, but to actually ask the right questions is so important. And I think the thing of the history, Mary, I'm not sure I'm going to give you the microphone. I'm not sure. What do you think? Passo? Will I? Okay. So I'm going to thank you before I hand the microphone to Mario, because it might be a while before I get it back. And just to say that I think the presentations were absolutely fantastic. I hope you enjoyed it as an audience, but please let Mario have the final word.
Sì. No, io volevo dire sulla storia del passato. Attenzione, il passato non è nostalgia. Il passato il passato, dicevo, non è nostalgia. Noi abbiamo bisogno del passato per nutrire il presente. È come pensare che Picasso possa esistere senza l'arte greca, l'arte primitiva, l'arte, cioè non è possibile, no? È la benzina, è l'alimento che lui ha avuto per poter dare un segno contemporaneo. Quindi da questo punto di vista. Ma volevo dire sul problema dell'architettura e anche rispondere alla riflessione su Aldo Rossi e Tafuri della città. L'architettura aspira a diventare città. L'architettura non nasce come oggetto isolato. La forza del fatto architettonico che noi leggiamo non è dato dal volume, ma dai rapporti spaziali che stabilisce col contesto di storia, col contesto contemporaneo, col contesto fisico, col contesto delle idee degli uomini. L'architettura dialoga per diventare parte della città. E allora l'ultima osservazione, la città ancora oggi è la forma di aggregazione umana più bella, più performante, più intelligente che noi conosciamo. Non esiste un'altra forma di vita sociale talmente performante. Dal Neolitico via fino ad oggi noi dobbiamo fare i conti con la nostra città. E se crediamo che l'architettura può migliorare, può dare dei valori positivi, ecco che allora l'architettura, il fatto architettonico trova ancora una ragione collettiva, che è la ragione per la quale tutti noi lavoriamo e abbiamo questa tensione etica.
Okay. Sorry, the translator said okay into my ear. Thank you so much, and thank you to each of the 5 visitors. It was fantastic. Thank you.